Hi, I'm Rachel Cantor, Executive Director of Mississippi First, coming to you with a new video in our series explaining the legislative process to ordinary Mississippians. Today is February 1st, which is the day after the first committee deadline. Committee deadlines are deadlines that say that if bills do not get passed through their original committee, then they are dead, which means that a lawmaker cannot bring up the bill, it cannot continue through the legislative process. So yesterday, January 31st, when the deadline was, a lot of bills that had been introduced died, and they will no longer be considered for debate or passed into law. So a lot of interesting things happened yesterday with a lot of bills that many people in public education care about. One of the questions that we have gotten in the last 24 hours a lot is, what is a dummy bill? The news media has done a lot of reporting recently about whether or not the EdBuild formula recommendations would pass, what they would look like when they actually made it into bill language, etc. The legislature in both the House and the Senate had to, by yesterday, get a bill through the committee on this topic in order to continue the debate on the issue. However, a bill was not ready in either the House or the Senate. At least that's what the House and Senate leadership have said. They were not ready to introduce specific bill language and commit themselves to a specific plan around a school funding rewrite. As a result, what they did is they passed a dummy bill. So what is a dummy bill? One of the rules in the legislature is that once a deadline passes, if there is no bill for which a certain topic is germane, then you cannot add language to any other bill about that topic. So, what the legislature had to do, since they didn't have a specific bill ready, is they had to pass at least one bill that had the code sections of the current Mississippi Adequate Education Program code in them in order to keep the topic alive. So in both the House and the Senate, they passed bills that were essentially just bringing forward, which means reprinting, the code sections of current law around school funding, so that at some later point they could amend those bills that are really just restatements of current law to include the new plan around school funding. They had to do this by yesterday, otherwise they can't bring up this topic this year without 2/3 of both houses passing a joint resolution saying that they could bring a bill forward on this topic. So they had to get some kind of bill with the code sections open through the committees. And both of them basically passed these bills that were just the code sections with very few changes through the committees. And that's why people call them dummy bills, because they're basically placeholders for whenever the leadership is ready to introduce actual bill language. Now, at any point, someone could amend these dummy bills to include language. It could happen before these bills come to the floor. It could happen when these bills go to the committee on the opposite houses. It could even happen as late as conference. Now, we're all hoping that there will be specific bill language well before these bills go to conference. However, at this point, now that these bills have been passed in this form through the committee, in order to amend them, there has to be a public vote on these amendments. So we've got this dummy bill, but if we want to change it to say something else, they would actually have to, when they bring the bill to the floor of either the House or the Senate, the full House or the Senate would have to act to adopt either an amendment or replacement language for the bills. So that's what could happen if they decide to put in the language before it goes to the floor. However, I would suspect that they may wait until the bills are back in committee, because that is when it's easier to have a fuller conversation. It's often if something like this were to happen before it goes to the floor, it would be a very long floor debate. Now they could do that. That could be what their plan is. We don't know. But it may be that they're going to wait until the bills go to either houses and go back through committee before they bring up full bill language, which will be in a few weeks from now. But when it comes into committee, what they can do is something called a committee substitute. So, or actually when it comes over from the other house, they typically call it a strike all. So there's a rule that says that the committees can take a bill with a code section and they can strike all of the language in the bill, that's why it's called a strike all, and replace it with something else as long as it's germane to that code section that the bill is about. So what they would do when it would come, say the House bill comes to the Senate, is the Senate would have a strike all amendment that replaces all of the bill language with new language, and then they would actually debate and vote on that strike all and then send that strike all to the floor. So that is how this process might work. Like I said, we don't know when we'll see language to fill those dummy bills. But that language, whether it comes before the bill goes, or when the bill goes to the floor, or when the bill comes back through committee, will have to be uploaded to the legislative website for everyone to see. Luckily, hopefully legislators will be able to see and digest the bill language well before the final vote. We do expect that to happen. We just don't know how soon in the process that will happen. If the bill waits all the way until it gets to the conference committee before we see full bill language, that's when it's going to get a little bit harder to understand, because those conference reports, though when they're written, that process is not as transparent as the regular committee meetings or the floor votes. So I hope that we'll see that language before the conference committee, but we'll wait and see. I hope this has been helpful. Thanks.